I know I've often said to you, when you came to the school, I said to you, you never talk about schools. And you said, oh, it's true. I don't really talk about schools. And I said, yeah, well, you should talk about schools because they're the most important institutions in any country.
Yes.
Because children
Yes.
are the future. And so when all of you guys, and when I say guys, I mean, they're women too, like Barry Weiss or Megan Kelly or John McWhorter or Glenn Lowry and all these people who I have huge admiration for all of you. Nobody ever talks about schools. Nobody ever talks about the importance of our education system. And then what you all do is you talk about what's going on in the universities and you say, oh my goodness, how come these young people think as they do? And how come we've got all of these marches and so on and so forth, things that are happening? And we think, how come they're not thinking about stuff in the way, why haven't they developed critical thinking? And this is where I sort of have a bit of a bugbear with you. And I want to say to you, I want to explain why I think, not just you, all these people I have huge admiration for, Jonathan Haidt, Abigail Schreier. I read all of your stuff and I love it. But when it comes to children, I think you're all wrong. Elon Musk, the other day, I saw him, on some video, he was talking about how to teach children, and he's wrong. You're all wrong. And let me explain why. The fact is, you're all wondering why it is these students at university don't think in a critical manner. And then what you all say is, what we need to do is teach them how to think, not what to think. But you're wrong. We need to teach them what to think, okay? Because what's currently happening is we are teaching them how to think. And what does that mean? In fact, I should ask you, when you all say things like that, teach them how to think, what do you mean?
Well, we mean with this Peterson Academy that I'm putting forward is that we don't want a university, and I'm speaking specifically of universities, to be an ideological propaganda factory. And so really it's a dig at the radical left.
Okay.
And then I would also say, I'll say two things in response to the other things you said. I have talked privately with any number of government officials, especially on the Republican side, about the absolute catastrophe that's unfolding in the K-12 system. And one of my dreams, and you can tell me what you think about this, is that I think that the right to teacher certification should be taken away from the faculties of education.
Okay.
Because I think they have done a job that's so abysmal that it's almost indescribable. And I've talked to plenty of Republican governors about this, and it's one of my lifelong ambitions.
Yes, I agree. We'll 100% agree on that. Teacher training institutions are a disaster. But okay, and it's really interesting what you said. You don't want this ideology just pumped through kids, and I 100% agree with you.
Not at universities.
Yes.
That's not the same as K through 12. And,
okay.
I also agree with your approach from the particular upward with regards to children.
I know.
So that's crucial.
I know. It's just that when you all talk about this business of teaching them how to think, what that looks like in a classroom, in a high school, is that, okay, so what that is the standard discussion between knowledge and skills. Should we teach them knowledge or should we teach them skills? How to think is a skill, and it can only be done within a particular domain. So I don't know how to think about cars. Okay, if you told me, you put a car in front of me and said, create a different kind of car, Catherine, be creative, think outside the box, I wouldn't know what to do because I don't know anything about cars. But if you tell me to turn education on its head, I've done exactly that. I've been very radical. I've thought outside the box and I've done things very differently. Why? Because I know education inside out. The only way you can think in a creative manner or think outside the box and have independent thoughts about anything is to know it really well. And so that means children at school level need to be taught loads of knowledge. So when you all say things like we need to teach them how to think, I disagree with you. When I say we need to teach them what to think, what I mean by that is we need to give them knowledge about the world wars, about slavery, about colonialism, about all of these ideas that if they don't have historical knowledge, they're unable to make a judgment that is well informed and that isn't just going to go down an ideological route. All children are communists, okay? They're all communists. When you talk to them, they're all communists because when they hear about communism, they go, you mean everybody is going to have equality? You mean we're going to share? And then, everybody poor and rich doesn't happen anymore. Everybody's just the same. That's lovely. And the reason why children are all communists is because they're naive. they're vulnerable and it sounds nice to them. And so that's what they go for. They don't have enough knowledge or enough wisdom to be able to make correct decisions. That's why, for instance, we ban alcohol, we ban cigarettes. I believe we should ban smartphones, we ban sex, we ban marriage, we ban driving. There are all kinds of things that we ban from children. And the thing about the libertarian right, while I myself believe in freedom and I believe in freedom of speech and all of that, when it comes to children, I don't believe in any of it. I believe that children need their freedoms restricted so that later in life they can be truly free. And when I say their freedoms need to be restricted, that doesn't mean that they're unhappy. You saw at my school just how happy they were.
So let me ask you a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Do you mean that their freedoms should be restricted, or do you mean that the domain within which they have freedom should be restricted?
No, I would say
because
both.
Those are different, right?
Yeah.
Because the one tilts more to, in some sense, conceptually towards control. See, let me give you an example. You tell me what you think about this. This is a very concrete example, so it brings it down to earth. So imagine you have a 4-year-old child and he has a closet full of clothes, like 40 outfits to wear, and they're all hanging on hangers. And maybe he's a little hungry and a little tired, and you open up the closet and you say, which of those outfits do you want to wear? And he has a meltdown. Okay, and so imagine that instead you take 3 of those items of clothing off the hangers and you put them on the bed and you say, which of those 3 pieces of clothing would you like to wear? And then he can point to one with no problem. And it's like so there's a consumer choice literature, for example, that shows you that if you have 4 shampoos to choose from on the shelf and you pick one, you're happier with your purchase than you are if you have 200 on the shelf to pick from, because you drown in complexity and you've probably made the wrong choice. So with children, my sense is that, they need that play that enables them to decide, but adults are supposed to be wise enough so that the domain of choice that's presented to them is commensurate with their actual emotional and cognitive ability. So, I'm wondering what you think of that formulation.
Yeah, I don't think that the 4-year-old should be choosing at all. I don't. I think you're in a rush. You need to get him to school, get him in his clothes, and
yes,
go.
There's that.
Right? And sometimes I'm in the supermarket.
When that's the case.
I'm in the supermarket and I'm watching parents say, darling, what would you like from the freezer to eat? And I'm looking at them thinking, why are you asking them? Just take what you want, put it in the basket and go. You've got a life, Like these children who are the center of the world, we need to ask them what they think about everything. We have to ask them, what would you like to eat? Put the spinach and broccoli in front of them and tell them to eat it. And that's what we do at Michaela. They have one choice. They don't have any choice at lunch. They all eat the same thing. And we call it family lunch, and you had lunch with the children. Why? Why do we call it family lunch? Because it's like family dinner. And what used to happen at family dinner? I have to say, I don't think this happens anymore in many households, because everybody's on their phone or their iPad and they take their plate of food and they go and sit in their bedroom. But what should be happening is that you sit around a table and that you all serve out the food and you're all eating from one pot of food. And if you don't like it very much, well, you suck it up, because that's what it is to be a child. Okay. And you learn how to eat different foods because your parents don't let you to get away with this idea of, I'm a free human being and it's against my human rights and I should be able to eat what I want. No, you shouldn't be able to eat what you want. You're a child. Now, look, that's why people call me strict, but it's because I love them that I think we should be doing this, because by doing that, we teach them how to become adults.
Be communal.
And you talk about, exactly,
Yep.
You say that
Absolutely.
you don't want children, you shouldn't bring up children who you're going to dislike. Well, the more choices and the more freedom you give them in that sense, the more you're going to dislike them as adults. I mean, the fact is, you cannot be friends with your children when they're children and be friends with them when they're adults. You have to choose. And you should not be friends with them when they're children, because otherwise you're not going to like them when they're adults. You are in a position of authority. And you should be molding your child and helping him with his moral formation and giving him knowledge. And the school should be doing both as well, both moral formation and giving him knowledge. And where I worry about the libertarian right is the freedoms that they enjoy amongst adults, they then impose that on children, or they don't realize that that's what they're doing. And then they think, oh my goodness, but why is it all these students at university are behaving the way that they do? It's because the schools have not taught them what to think. When I say what to think, giving them the facts about the various the world wars, giving them the facts about the history of their country, making them feel as if they belong in their country and that their history belongs to them, that the geography of their country is taught to them. If, on the other hand, the school is convinced that actually what they need to do is teach them how to think, and then nobody can agree on what that looks like because it's a skill, and outside of its domain of knowledge, it cannot be taught independently. It's impossible. All you can do is give children knowledge. You see, what those skills are is actually bits of knowledge. And when you give them lots of bits of knowledge about, say, the Second World War, they are then be able to piece together what they think of it. Now, the problem we've got nowadays is that the schools are teaching them with a particular ideology in mind. So in Britain, for instance, I see very much that history lessons in schools, they will be teaching about how the British were really racist and how the Indian soldiers who were fighting for Britain were treated very badly. And you know what? I'm not even saying that isn't true. But when it comes to secondary school children who might have 1 or 2 lessons a week in history, and they're only going to have it for a few years, shouldn't the focus be them knowing 1914 and 1918? Shouldn't the focus be them knowing about Hitler in the Second World War? I mean, there are certain facts that the children, they've never heard of the Battle of the Somme. They've never heard of the details of the various key battles in the First World War and the Second World War. And they've never heard of them because they're too busy being taught stories that are ideological, which will convince them that the British, for instance, are racist, or convince them that there were various important female characters in our historical history, and that's what matters. And of course, Elizabeth I, absolutely. But there are other people that are brought forward as being very important when they're not so important, but because they're taught through an ideological lens, which is 2024, as opposed to teaching them the basics of their own history so that they can feel that they are